Welcome back to another episode of The Loco Fit Show, where we redefine what healthy means to you. I'm your host, Laurin Conlon, and today I'm joined by Rick, our team mental health counselor, to answer the question, can you save a relationship after an affair? Now, we recognize this is a very loaded question and have also discussed that we're going to do a full-length episode on affairs, cheating, recovering from just kind of really tough relationship situations because that needs to be dedicated to an entire full-length podcast. But this question specifically, can you save a relationship after an affair? The short answer and then the short-ish answer, and then we'll do the long-ish answer on another one.
The short answer is yes, you can. It is very common for people to cheat. In fact, the very concept of cheating in affairs is as tried and true as the concept of marriage, monogamy in and of itself. So it's been around for forever. But the simple truth of the matter is, yes, it is. The major component is whether or not it's a limiting belief for you. And I say belief because beliefs are deeply rooted in who we are. Versus thoughts can be changed, right? Like you and I could argue about whether or not Top Gun is the best movie ever. It's not a belief. That's a thought. However,
have you seen the new one?
I have, and it's amazing.
I was like, this has to be a plug for the new movie or something.
No, but a belief would be like me trying to convince you that God doesn't exist. Slightly more difficult, right? Why? Because it's ingrained in who you are. Well, for a lot of people, the idea, the concept of monogamy, of commitment, of faith, of loyalty is more closely related and tied to core beliefs that they maintain as a person. And so if for you, and you've gone your whole life by saying, this is a deal breaker for me, and this is something that I wouldn't tolerate and can't tolerate. Well, now you've got years of tradition and thoughts that have reinforced this concept, where now if you find yourself in the middle of an affair or somebody who has cheated on you, it really becomes a difficult thing for you to overcome because it's been this very limiting belief in your life, and now you're forced to confront that belief. And changing beliefs, as any therapist or anybody who's in kind of the psychology field will tell you, is one of the more difficult tasks that we have. And it's not necessarily our job to change your beliefs as much as it is sometimes to challenge them. So, first and foremost, you can always start by saying, what is an affair? What is cheating, right?
Yeah, because there's different definitions, especially now. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of different ways. Obviously, there's emotional cheating, right? Which people could say that there's nothing physical that happened, but emotionally you're invested in somebody who's not your partner. So there's that, which is kind of hard to quantify, but obviously it still is impactful. And then there's, of course, the cheating that we most think of. But then there's also now, where is the line? Like sexting, sending naked pictures, or at least sending some type of photo, messaging apps, like all these different things. Some people might say, oh, I don't mind that my significant other is subscribed to 5 OnlyFans and they are giving money to this person and this and that, and these things are happening, right? But you have to define that, because then another person can find that out and go, no, that is definitely, maybe that's not cheating, but that to them, but they're like, that's just not appropriate. So defining those things, I think, is also very different, because now the floodgates with the internet have opened up, and there are so many things to define that we didn't have to define before. It's either like you cheated on someone in a sexual way or you didn't, and now there's like a whole other slew of things, but to you as the individual, that might not be seen as cheating, whereas to your partner, it might be. So that's also where that disconnect is. It was kind of like the taking a break podcast, right? Well, what is a break? We have to define that. So here we also need to define what cheating is, because that might look and feel different to each individual. And
it does. And so each couple should really kind of define this. Not that you
guys are... It's such an awful thing to think about. Like,
not that we're preparing for that, but like...
So what would be considered cheating? It's like the third date. So what would we consider cheating?
Did we talk about red flags? That might be... I just need to know what I can get away with and what I can't.
We're not even a bottle of wine deep. What the fuck are we talking about? That's some shit I'd bring up on a date. But anyways, that's a good point, though. Dating tips from me. Maybe the 4th date, not the 3rd. Get through the first 3.
That'll be your own podcast.
Terrible life advice with Laurin.
But no, you bring up a good point. Like, what is an affair? What does it look like? Is it a hookup? Is it a love story? Is it paid sex? Is it a massage with happy ending? Is it sexting? Is it keeping profiles open on dating websites? Like, it can be a lot of different things. So there's 3 main components that I think most affairs follow. Most research and literature will point out. Number 1 is that there's a secretive relationship of some kind. And number 2, that there's an emotional connection. And number 3, that there's a sexual component. And if it's kind of hitting on all those, you can split hairs about what is or what isn't. But generally speaking, most of the examples people will provide will hit on all 3 of those. Now, why affairs hurt so much is related to whether or not how and why we can get over this. And the reason for that is affairs hurt so much because we oftentimes will turn to one person to meet our romantic needs. We call this kind of like romantic idealism. What I mean by that is this one person has become my greatest lover, my best friend, my trusted confidant, the best parent, my emotional companion, my intellectual equal. Like, that's a lot for one person, right, to fulfill. And when we talk about, when you ask people, like, what does your partner mean to you? And they fill this box. When that person cheats on you, it's like the ultimate betrayal of all of those things. And so affairs oftentimes mimic a traumatic experience for people because it threatens your sense of self. And if this one person who was everything to you because we built them up to be, instead of like having a community that kind of provides all these things, we look to one person to do it, especially in today's society where we're more reclusive and isolated. It becomes this crisis of identity. So a lot of times when people are struggling with affairs, what I hear is, can I trust you? Can I trust anyone? I thought I knew my life. I thought I knew who you were, who we were as a couple, who I was. Now they're questioning everything. This violation of trust. Can I ever trust you? Can I ever trust myself again? Right? So this isn't just like, oh, they cheated on me. This is a much bigger related topic as it relates to who we are as a person, as a couple, who I am as an individual. And so this is what makes affairs so difficult and why it's such a difficult hurdle to get over. And kind of a fair common sense or logic dictates this, that it dictates that there must be something wrong with you or the relationship in order for somebody to cheat. And oftentimes that's not the case. What we find is that when people cheat, they're cheating for a lot of other reasons, and we'll get into those reasons when we have kind of the full length podcast. But one of the things that people are struggling with when they cheat is that sometimes the concept isn't that I'm turning away from my partner, but that I'm turning away sometimes from the person that I've become, the person that I've been in this relationship. And so when we start looking at an affair sometimes as a tool, right? And I know that that's going to sound really weird because I'm challenging this, but maybe this happened as a way to start to crack the facade of a relationship that wasn't working to begin with. Because what a lot of times happens is we start getting set into these patterns where we stop being honest and authentic with each other, and we follow social etiquette and norms and procedures that we're supposed to follow, which reject this inner sense of who I really am, what my desires, needs are, who I'm growing and changing to as a person. And because I don't have an outlet for those authentic things, like, affairs become the way to have those things, or they become an outlet for some of those impulses. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. Well,
that makes sense. And like you said, it's oftentimes uncovering something that's there anyway. Mm-hmm. And not to say that anybody needs to go through an affair to uncover the problems in their relationship, but it will certainly magnify those because there is always a deeper reason, right? I mean, of course, maybe not always, right? Sometimes it's just shit happens, and I'm not going to pretend like I know every reason why somebody's ever had an affair, but generally speaking, there probably is a deeper reason, and getting to the root of that, whether it's you or that person mm-hmm. or the relationship or all 3 of those things, because it's usually all 3 of those things.
Right.
Like, it's not just one particular thing. Right. Well, if I had done this, it's like, it's not that. Mm-hmm. It's not that one thing or not that one time. It's a whole series of mm-hmm. things, and those things compound.
Yeah. And we're not talking about somebody who is a chronic cheater.
No.
This is I've been in a committed relationship and I've been monogamous maybe my entire life, this entire relationship, and now suddenly I find myself attracted to or had sex with somebody or had an affair. And so this is what we're talking about. We're not talking about the person who cheats every other weekend.
That's a little bit different.
Yeah. So sometimes what I want people to understand is it's not always about sex. Sometimes it can be more about desire. And sometimes it's not about what's missing in the relationship or looking for someone else. But sometimes it's about looking for another version of yourself that somebody is finding someplace else. For some people, that sounds like a rationalization or an excuse. But the question I would have is, are you trying to work through this and understand it so that you can change and benefit your relationship in the long run? Or are you looking to judge because you're still hurt and you want to punish this person? There's a very different space for you to acknowledge and recognize, and both are very legitimate and deserve their due process within the relationship. So what I want to do is I want to get to just some bullet points on how to get over an affair if it happens, since that's basically what we're talking about. And I said, yes, you can. So number one, first and foremost, you have to end the affair. There isn't a way for you to like continue the affair and then say, oh no, we're going to get better. Like, no, you got to end it. Like, there's no two ways about that. That's a hard and fast line. End the affair. Number two, you must take responsibility for what you've done.
Who?
The person who had the affair. And then...
I thought so. I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah. As you guys understand and progress through this, you might realize that the other person, the person who was cheated on, might need to take some responsibility for things that were happening in the relationship. And I know that that sounds hard for some people, like, wait a minute, I'm the one who's been victimized. But oftentimes what I'll discover is in every single problem, and people who are open-minded and can think about this will realize and discover that I also created some of the environment for these things to exist. And that doesn't mean you're culpable for your boyfriend or husband or wife or fiance cheating on you, but it does mean I played a role and I want to understand this. And can these changes, or can the events that occurred, can I be responsible for some of the changes? So I have to take responsibility for that because I did hurt you. I did step outside the relationship. I did break those vows. And so in doing that, me taking responsibility frees you from the burden of the obsession that comes with thinking about the affair, right? Because a lot of times the next part is, when I say take responsibility, it leads into the next section where it's like learning to be the protector of the relationship. So I broke the relationship by stepping outside and breaking our vows. Well, now I need to be the protector of it. So by taking responsibility, by me bringing it up, by me discussing it, by me making sure that I'm taking steps and doing things to make the relationship safe, I'm eliminating the burden of that obsessive thought process from you. And I'm owning that. So that's a really important step. The next one is for the person who has been hurt to start to do things that are essential to bring back a sense of self-worth. Because a lot of times, as I said, we're questioning who we are, our value, our self-esteem hits rock bottom. So finding things that bring a sense of self-worth to you, surrounding yourself with people that you love, by friends, doing activities, things that bring back joy and meaning and help you identify and create identity within you is important. When we get into the longer podcast, I'm going to explain this one more. Stop asking the wrong questions. Oftentimes people are like, they want to ask, like, was she good? Was she better than me? Was he hotter? Like, what was, and it's like that becomes death by 1,000 cuts. Instead of asking the right questions, like, what was it like for you, when you were having this experience? What did this person fulfill or provide for you that I couldn't? Very different. Very hard questions to ask and even harder answers to come. But there's the space of healing from the relationship and learning to grow it. And, what did this experience mean to you? What was it like for you to come home? Is this what you value in somebody? And so sometimes there's this rediscovery of a person who you've known for 5, 10, 15, 20, 14, 13 years, whatever. And now all of a sudden you're like learning all these things about them that they've kept hidden, which is where the result came from. So yes, it's possible for you to get over an affair. Does it take work? Absolutely. Does it take a lot of trust and reestablishment? Yes. Is it an easy process? No. Because if you listened to some of those questions, to sit across from the person that you love and have them answer them in an honest, open manner, is one of the most difficult things you will encounter throughout your relationship with somebody. But if a person is truly remorseful and wants to work on the relationship, they'll answer those questions. And the beauty of it is this can be the catalyst to change your relationship and make it even better and more honest and authentic for both of you and break the facade of something that wasn't working.
Yeah, and I think that the question that we posed, can you save a relationship from an affair, is asking that in a way that you do want to work on this.
Yes.
Right? And the only way to work on this and work through this is to ask and answer those really hard questions. Mm-hmm. So while that is incredibly uncomfortable, just pushing it away is not going to lead to any resolve. And it most likely will lead to that person maybe either cheating again because mm-hmm. they're going to fall into the same pattern because nothing has changed, or they're just going to say, I don't want to deal with this, and then they leave.
Right.
So under the guise that you actually want to save this, mm-hmm. you're going to have to ask those questions and be willing to hear what that person is saying to you, which is very hard, right? Like there is no easy way around that for somebody to be like, well, you're not doing this, or this happened, or I liked this about somebody else. Like, that's awful stuff to hear. Mm-hmm. But if that's something that, you can work on together or is a feasible thing, you don't want to just, of course, it's within reason, you know mm-hmm. what I mean? But those are important questions and you have to be willing to hear that. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, then you don't want to save the relationship. Right. If you're just shutting that out and you're just saying, well, you shouldn't have done that. Okay, then bye, right? Then it's over. Right. Like if you're just upset over it and being reactionary, which is understandable, but then you're not trying to save this. So I'm really excited for us to dive into that because I know that a lot of people who are listening have dealt with this in some capacity. And if you guys have any specific questions about cheating, affairs, getting over these type of relationship struggles, definitely leave those questions in the link below. We'll put that in the show notes so we can gather some more information before that podcast. But I know we'll have a lot of really great stuff in there. So if you guys enjoyed this show, please share it. That is the best way to support us. For more information on one-on-one coaching, visit teamlocofit.com and make sure to join our email list for great information and be the first ones to hear about the app that we're releasing in the next few months. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you on Wednesday.